Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, Story 8.
Imagine tripping on a dirt road, dying, and being so profoundly disciplined that your mind doesn't even notice your heart stop beating.
Right, you just don't see a white light at all.
Exactly. You don't feel this sudden, violent separation from your physical form. You just sort of stand up, brush yourself off, and keep walking.
Completely unaware that you are now just a drifting consciousness. It sounds impossible to modern ears, I know.
Oh, totally impossible.
But it requires us to really rethink what happens when consciousness is just entirely decoupled from sensory input. Because if you spent 70 years training your brain to ignore the physical body,
Right, ignoring hunger, ignoring pain.
exactly, ignoring all comfort, then the ultimate physical failure, which is death itself, just wouldn't trigger the usual psychological alarm bells. You wouldn't realize you lost your body because, well, your identity wasn't tethered to it in the first place.
We're jumping straight into a fascinating 17th century text of Liao Zizi, or Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio.
A truly incredible collection.
It really is. And today we're looking at a surreal, centuries-old tale called The Monk of Changqing. And I feel like when people hear that title, they probably expect, a traditional spooky folklore piece.
Yeah, like a spirit haunting a temple courtyard or something along those lines.
Right, or a straightforward karmic morality tale. But this is really different.
Oh, it is. The author, Pu Songling, he deliberately plays with those expectations. He uses this framework of a supernatural occurrence to disguise this massive philosophical argument.
It reads almost like a chaotic, historical body swap comedy, but then it abruptly shifts into a masterclass on human willpower.
It really does.
And to really grasp the sheer absurdity of what happens, we have to look at the two radically different lives the author places on a collision course here. First, we have this highly virtuous 70-something-year-old monk in Chongqing.
Right, a man of extreme discipline.
Yes, his entire existence is strict, ascetic discipline. Absolute poverty, endless meditation, zero worldly attachments. He's a man who has intentionally shrunk his physical footprint to almost nothing.
And that intentional shrinking is crucial. He hasn't just given up wealth, he has completely starved his ego. But
Yeah.
then, on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, the text introduces a wealthy gentleman's son in the Henan province.
The ultimate rich kid.
Exactly. This is a young man who basically won the 17th century lottery. He spends his days immersed in pure physical thrill-seeking, hunting with falcons, riding wild horses, just consuming everything the material world has to offer. He is the absolute embodiment of appetite.
Which makes the inciting incident so fascinating to me. Because the ascetic monk in his 70s is out for a walk. He trips, falls, and dies.
Just like that.
Yeah, just like that. The text casually notes that he achieves nirvana, but there's no dramatic ascension, right? He literally walks off his own death. His soul just keeps drifting along the road, wandering all the way to the Henan border.
The author establishes a brilliant contrast here through the mechanics of their deaths. You have the quiet, aggressively mundane end of the monk. His spiritual state is so elevated that his departure from the physical world is entirely frictionless.
Frictionless is such a good word for it.
Right. But over in Henan, the wealthy young man experiences this violent flesh and blood destruction that's so typical of a thrill seeker. He is thrown from a runaway horse and killed instantly.
So we have the frictionless departure of the disciplined mind colliding with the shattered body of the ultimate consumer. Because the monk's perfectly calm, drifting soul just happens to float past the young man's freshly deceased body.
And the text says they simply merge.
Yeah. The monk didn't cast a dark spell. He didn't seek out a second chance at life. He just tripped, wandered into another province, and accidentally hijacked a billionaire playboy's body.
It's incredible.
It's like a 17th century Freaky Friday or Quantum Leap, but driven entirely by cosmic coincidences.
And that accidental merging is the engine for the real test in the story. Because, practicing asceticism as an old, impoverished monk in a quiet temple is one thing. The environment reinforces the behavior.
Oh, for sure. It's easy to be a monk in a monastery.
Exactly. The true stress test of that discipline is being thrust into a young, hormone-driven body surrounded by absolute bottomless luxury.
And that stress test begins with a massive, jarring psychological shock. Servants see their dead master revive, and they frantically rush him back to the estate. The monk opens his eyes, and instead of the bare wooden beams of his
He
monastery,
gets a sensory overload.
a total sensory nightmare. The text vividly describes him being swarmed by women who are powdered white and painted green, which means the young man's wife and concubines. They're weeping, rejoicing, and just crowding his personal space.
Consider the biological mechanism of what is happening to him in that moment. His consciousness is suddenly receiving inputs from a nervous system that has been entirely wired for indulgence.
Oh, wow, yeah.
He is smelling heavy perfumes, feeling expensive silks against his skin, hearing the clamor of a wealthy household. For the average person, this sounds like a fantasy. But for a mind trained to seek stillness, it is an invasive, overwhelming attack.
And his immediate reaction proves how completely his internal identity rejects that attack. Because he screams in terror, "I am a monk, how did I get here?"
And the family obviously assumes the head trauma from the horse fall has just made him delirious.
Yeah, actually. And my absolute favorite detail in the entire text is the medical intervention they attempt. They literally pull on his ears to try and snap him out of it.
It grounds this deeply metaphysical story in a very physical, almost slapstick reality.
Totally. But the ear-pulling fails, obviously. And when the family refuses to believe him, the monk makes a critical strategic pivot. He doesn't keep arguing his case. He just initiates a silent, ascetic rebellion.
Right. He shuts down.
Yeah, he shuts his eyes, stops talking, and demands plain, coarse grain instead of wine and meat. He insists on sleeping entirely alone, banishing the wives and concubines. But, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
If you or I woke up with infinite wealth, a vibrant, healthy body, and an army of servants, human nature dictates we would at least take it for a test drive.
Oh, absolutely. Most people would.
Right. So why doesn't he just, I don't know, enjoy the silk sheets for one night before going back to the coarse grain? Why is his immediate reaction absolute terror?
Well, taking it for a test drive implies a separation between the person and the temptation. But the monk, he understands the actual mechanics of desire. Giving in to the physical comforts, even for a single night, would begin rewriting his neural pathways.
Oh, I see.
His entire identity is built on decades of denying those specific comforts. Those luxuries aren't a reward to him. They threaten to dissolve the very core of who he is. He's essentially trying to construct an invisible monastery inside that mansion just to survive.
But, building an invisible monastery inside a mansion really only works if they actually leave you alone.
Which they don't.
No, they don't. Waking up rich isn't just about avoiding sensory temptations. Wealth has this, inescapable gravity to it.
The logistics of wealth.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So after a few days of eating plain grain and refusing to speak, the monk, who is still trapped in the young man's body, decides he wants to take a short walk to get some air.
And that simple desire to take a walk instantly triggers the machinery of the estate. The servants swarm him again.
And not with wine or falcons this time.
No, with massive stacks of account books, grain ledgers, and financial spreadsheets, because they need the master to manage the fortune.
It completely ruins that ultimate lottery fantasy so many people have, right? Like retiring to a massive estate and never working again. This text brilliantly reminds us that waking up rich often just means waking up to a different kind of grueling job, the bureaucracy of wealth.
Yeah, and he is so repulsed by the ledgers that he literally fakes an illness just to escape the paperwork.
It's hilarious, but also so profound.
Faking the illness is a highly symbolic act. He is recognizing that the wealth itself is a sickness. The author is showing us that the traps of the material world aren't just the obvious pleasures.
Right.
The orchids and musk aren't just perfumes. They are the heavy logistical chains of worldly affairs. He realizes he can't just sit in the mansion ignoring people. He has to sever the logistical ties, too.
And that realization forces him onto the road. He asks the servants if they know of Chang County in Shandong, which is his old home, and when they confirm it, he claims he's bored and demands to travel there immediately.
Even though he just recovered from a fatal accident.
Exactly. The wealthy family protests, reminding him he just survived this terrible horse riding accident, but he entirely ignores them.
So we shift from a domestic comedy into a surreal pilgrimage. He is traveling back to the geographical site of his own life, but he is doing it as an unrecognizable, wealthy stranger.
And when he finally arrives at his old temple, Lan Ruo, the dramatic irony is almost painful. His old disciples see this aristocratic young man roll up with a full entourage of servants and carriages.
And they immediately start bowing and scraping.
Yeah, treating him with deep, fawning reverence. They have absolutely no idea they're groveling before their own fiercely ascetic master.
It brutally exposes the superficiality of status. I mean, the disciples revere the master's teachings in theory, but in practice, they immediately submit to the external markers of wealth. They are bowing to the silk and the carriages, not the man.
Wow, yeah. And the scene gets even heavier. He asks the disciples where the old monk is, and they tell him the master recently passed away. He asks to see the grave.
This is such a powerful moment.
It really is. So they lead him out to the grave, and the text paints this incredibly unsettling visual. It is a 3-foot grave, and the wild grass hasn't even grown together over the disturbed dirt yet.
It's completely fresh.
Yeah. He is standing there in a young man's body, staring at the freshly turned dirt of his own burial mound.
It is the ultimate confrontation with the impermanence of the physical self. I mean, he's looking at the discarded vessel he spent 80 years inhabiting.
But his reaction completely baffles me. He doesn't say a single word about his identity.
Not one.
He just looks at his own grave, tells the disciples to guard the master's relics carefully, turns around, and leaves.
Yeah.
Like, why on earth doesn't he just tell his disciples the truth right then and there? He's standing at his own grave.
It's a huge test.
Is he administering some kind of cruel test to see if they recognize his spirit? Or is the psychological weight of looking at his own coffin just too much to process?
Well, think about it. If he were governed by ego, he would absolutely shout, "It's me, I'm back." He would demand the recognition and the validation of his survival.
Right, you'd want people to know.
But his silence reflects deeply ingrained non-attachment. He doesn't need their external validation to know who he is. More importantly, seeing that fresh grave acts as a psychological mirror. He realizes the old monk, the 80-year-old avatar he identified with, is definitively gone.
The physical evidence of his death means he can't just slip back into his old life seamlessly.
Exactly. Seeing the dirt makes the suffering real. He can't live in the limbo between the wealthy heir and the dead ascetic.
So he returns to the family in Hannan, but a fundamental shift has occurred. The text describes his new state as ash heart and wooden sitting. He enters a state of utter, chilling apathy toward his luxurious life.
Ash heart and wooden sitting is such a profound physical description. Imagine a vibrant, healthy, 30-something body, but it holds itself with the stillness and rigidity of a weathered piece of wood.
Wow.
His heart is like cold ash. There are no sparks of desire, no warmth toward the material world. He is emotionally flatlined to his environment.
And after a few months of existing as a piece of human driftwood in this mansion, he makes his final move. He runs away. No permission, no entourage, no carriages. He hikes straight back to the temple in Changqing.
This is the actual climax of the narrative. The real tension wasn't whether he could survive the body swap. It was whether he possessed the willpower to execute this ultimate renunciation.
Yeah, because he walks into the temple completely unannounced and simply tells his disciples, "I am your master."
And naturally, they laugh in his face.
Who wouldn't? A rich young noble claiming to be an octogenarian ascetic is completely absurd. To prove it, he has to recount his soul's entire journey, detailing his past life. Every secret teaching, every mundane daily habit that only the true master could possibly know.
But providing the biographical data is just what cracks their disbelief, right? It isn't what truly convinces them. The ultimate proof of his identity is his behavior.
Oh, totally. Because he moves straight back into his old rock-hard bed. This is the ultimate quiet quitting. He abandons immense, bottomless generational wealth, literally leaving a fortune on the table to sleep on a wooden plank.
It's such a striking visual.
You have a physically young man who speaks, moves, and acts with the slow, deliberate sincerity of an 80-year-old monk.
He essentially forces his new physical reality to conform entirely to his internal identity. And the universe, almost as if deeply offended by his rejection of its gifts, tests him one last time.
Oh, right, the family.
Yes. His wealthy family discovers his location. They send grand carriages to the temple, begging him to return to his life of luxury and status. And he completely ignores them. He doesn't even acknowledge the carriages in the courtyard.
And then a year later, the wife from the Henan state escalates the temptation. She sends a servant, but not with a pleading letter. She sends gold and expensive silk.
She's trying to lure him back, using the very currency that defines her reality.
Exactly. And his response is the final permanent cut. He rejects every ounce of the gold, turns away the silk, and accepts only a single plain cloth robe.
Accepting that single cloth robe represents the total triumph of the internal over the external. I mean, he navigated the most extreme identity crisis imaginable, literally dying and being resurrected into a billionaire's body, and came out entirely unchanged at his core.
And Bu Songling, the author, He doesn't just drop the mic after that scene. He steps in at the end of the text under his pen name, the historian of the strange, to offer a commentary.
Yes, the historian's verdict.
And this commentary is where we find the tree mechanism behind the monk's survival, and really why this 17th century text feels so intensely relevant to you and me right now.
Because the historian's verdict recontextualizes everything we just discussed. The commentary states that normally, when ordinary people die, their soul scatters. It dissipates into nothing because it has no anchor.
Right.
But this monk's soul traveled 1,000 miles and stayed perfectly intact. And the text attributes this remarkable cohesion to a specific trait, his settled nature, or in the original Chinese, Xingding.
Changqing, a settled nature.
Exactly. It implies a mind that is so profoundly still, so deeply rooted in its own awareness, that even the violent trauma of bodily death cannot disrupt its cohesion.
And looking at how Pu Songling frames this in the commentary, I was struck by what he considers the actual feat of strength here, because he doesn't call the soul's survival a miracle.
Right, or the body swap itself.
Exactly. The text explicitly says the real miracle is that the monk was dropped into a world of ultimate luxury, surrounded by powdered beauty, and actually managed to cut himself off and escape.
The author gives a razor-sharp warning here. He states that if the monk had felt even a single flash of desire, like if his eyes had lingered for even a fraction of a second on the musk and orchids,
Which represent the intoxicating luxuries.
yes, if he had done that, his soul would have become hopelessly trapped.
The moment he wanted the wealth would own him.
Precisely. He would have been chained to that new body by his own desire, unable to escape even if he eventually wanted to die. His consciousness would have scattered, absorbed entirely into the identity of the wealthy heir.
Wow. It completely reframes focus and self-discipline as literal superpowers. It wasn't magic that kept his soul together when he tripped on that dirt road. It was the compound interest of decades of rigorous, boring, everyday mental training.
Yes, the daily choices.
It was the fact that he chose coarse grain over indulgence thousands of times before the accident ever happened. He built a fortress out of his own habits.
And when we pull this concept of Xingding out of the 17th century and apply it to our own lives, it forces a deeply uncomfortable self-reflection.
Yeah,
We have to identify our own orchids and musk.
definitely.
It's rarely as dramatic as waking up surrounded by concubines and falconers, you know? Today, the orchids and musk are the modern obsessions with optimizing for status.
It's the golden handcuffs of a corporate job you hate but can't leave because it funds a specific lifestyle. It's building an identity entirely around external validation, like how your life looks to other people, the aesthetic you project, the wealth you signal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when we tether our sense of self to those external markers, our nature is decidedly unsettled. We become highly reactive to our environment.
We scatter.
Right. The text is challenging us to cultivate an internal identity strong enough to withstand the immense pressure of our external circumstances. If everything you owned and everyone who validated you disappeared tomorrow, would your core identity hold together or would it scatter?